It is Speaker of the House Margaret Anderson-Kelliher who joins us now live. She just filed her paperwork today. Hello, Speaker of the House. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, everyone. Good to be with you, Mike.
Good to be with you, too. Now, you've been exploring this for a while. You filed your paperwork today. What pushed you over the edge to say, yep, I'm going to do this?
Well, I have been traveling around Minnesota having a lot of conversations with Minnesotans about the Minnesota they want to see. And I believe they want to see a Minnesota, and they want to see a Minnesota with a governor who's focused on them and looking for the solutions coming out of Minnesota. And that's exactly why today I'm up in International Falls, actually, meeting with a lot of the elected folks, but also visiting many of the businesses and talking with them about how we're going to get growth going all across the state. And, of course, that starts with getting a stable budget going in the state of Minnesota, which has been really a challenge the last few years. So I think that I've had a lot of encouragement from Minnesotans, a lot of people asking me to run, and I have decided to take them up on that, and I want to be the next governor of Minnesota.
I take it then that you think the state under your governorship would look a lot different than it has over the past 6 years.
Well, I think that Minnesota under a Margaret Anderson-Kelliher as governor would be a state that would be reaching high in terms of overachieving in education and being a leader on education, being a leader on health care, and really making sure that all Minnesotans have health care, making sure that every corner of the state would have economic prosperity, because they would be suggesting the tools to the State Economic Development Office that needs a fresh start. We need a new economic development plan in this state, and it needs to come from the people of Minnesota. It would look different because we would be beating the odds, and we would be leading the way.
Well, then let me ask you. The governor vetoed out the GMAC for the poorest of the poor, their health care. He's been promoting the Job Z program. Would Job Z continue if you were as governor? Would we see GMAC come back?
I think that we need to do two things there. First of all, on economic development, we need to use strategies that work. I think there's a lot of evidence that there is concern that Job Z has not done what it's promised to do, and that there are more effective tools that communities need, particularly rural communities need, in creating jobs, because jobs are actually going to come from those entrepreneurs and people who are interested in starting businesses out there. We need to give them the tools that they need. In metropolitan Minnesota, giving people the sort of support that they need to go out and start their own businesses and create jobs is a far more effective tool. But we're going to take a survey of all 50 states here and have the economic development plan laid out that is going to move Minnesota forward. And it's going to be a blueprint of success for Minnesota. Now, on GAMC, we very much need to make sure that we are not letting the poorest of the poor and the sickest of the sick of Minnesotans, who tend to be elderly, veterans, people with chemical dependency, we do not want them to be falling through the cracks and be unable to get the sort of service that they need in terms of health care. So we need to make sure that we are moving GAMC, a program that's basic health care, largely administered through hospitals. We need to be making a transition to make sure those Minnesotans are getting more care in a clinic-based setting, but also still have access to emergency care. So I think it's a new and better basic health care program that is actually going to save dollars, because we're going to be paying for it in a way that is not paying for the most expensive care we have, which is emergency medical room care.
And since health care tends to be a topic that's just dominating a lot of discussion recently, what do you think about public option? I know that's not something that is controlled here by the state per se, but the federal government is looking at what's called a public option. I would call it more of a lifesaver option. But what's your take on that?
You know what? It looks a lot more like our basic health care or GAMC program, and so here in Minnesota. So I actually think the federal government, some folks seem to have this notion federal government hasn't been involved in health care. We need to stop kidding ourselves. The federal government has been involved in health care very seriously since the late 1930s, early 40s, and most actively since the 1960s. And, we need to be able to make sure that people have a basic level of health care in our country. It is very important. And it's very important, as I've been going around and talking with folks who employ Minnesotans, and they tell me that this is one of the number one things that they face is the worry about being able to provide health coverage. So when folks are extremely poor, under $8,000, under $10,000, and they don't fit into one of the existing programs, they're not elderly, they're not disabled, we need to do something.
Let's talk about education for a minute. I'm picking on Governor Palente's pet programs here because I'm trying to draw the contrast between you and him, and I know that's not too hard, but hey, it's my job is easy today. QComp. The governor has been pushing what's called QComp, where teachers are paid apparently by how well they do their job, and how well they do their job is always, of course, subject to interpretation. For that, against that, something that needs to be looked at but tinkered with? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that right now we've been in the process of measuring if there is any measurable gain in school districts that have QComp. Right now, the work that's been done says it's inconclusive. No real gain, no falling back, though, either. And so overall, I think what we need to do is actually enact the new Minnesota Miracle, because the new Minnesota Miracle would equalize school funding around our state. So the school formula would be equal and more equalized around the state. It would be more transparent. People would understand it better. And there's a large portion of the new Minnesota Miracle that's property tax relief as well, to get away from paying for our schooling of our most precious resource, young people, off of our property taxes. And so that would be a very high priority of mine, is to enact the new Minnesota Miracle and be on a track to get that done. It also provides all-day, everyday kindergarten in every school district in the state. We need to do a better job all the way early childhood up through our college-age students.
Speaking of kindergarten, our governor sent what I would say a very childish, sarcastic letter to you and Larry Pogamiller about your invitation to a leadership summit with all of the living governors except for himself and and Governor Ventura and all the former leadership except all the former leadership that's living right now,
including Representative Swigum, Speaker Swigum. So
who is working
going
for
to
the
participate. I think the letter that the governor sent, in terms of its tone, speaks for itself. I have to say that it reminded me a lot of sometimes a little of what can come out of a teenager's mouth in terms of snarkiness. I think that's unfortunate. I think we actually need more respect and civility in our democratic process right now, from the federal level all the way down. And frankly, people are trying to problem solve here. This was really spurred by an op-ed that former Governor Carlson and former Congressman Tim Penny did together.
I read it.
And we said we really like the idea. We want to take them up on the idea.
Okay. Two more questions for you here real quick, because I know you've got a lot of things to do. One is, under a Margaret Anderson-Kelliher governorship, what would the transparency be like? Would we see meetings happening behind closed doors between the leadership like we saw in this last session because that was the only way the governor would do it? Or would that be open to the media and the public to witness what's going on?
Well, I think that we need to do much more of our work in public and out in the open. I think there is a occasional need for the private meeting, but let's be honest, all of our state government needs to be more transparent and accountable. And I think there needs to be real reform of our state government systems to provide that accountability and transparency, and frankly, it connects to value for Minnesotans. And so whether it's negotiations between the legislature that I have a lot of respect for and I would be willing to work with and really come to solutions with them, and I've proven that I'm willing to do that. I've passed and led the way on the comprehensive transportation bill, on the renewable energy standard in our state, on the legacy amendment. I've been willing to do that and able to do that, but that needs to be infused throughout our state government.
And I can say that I've seen a lot more of our state government thanks to a lot of the things that you've been doing there. Last question here, because I know you have to run. You are Speaker of the House right now. Your former counterpart here, Marty Seifert, stepped aside in his role as minority leader when he decided to run for governor. Are you going to continue in your role as Speaker of the House, or is that going to change before this next session?
I am going to keep in the Speaker of the Role spot. I don't really see a lot of other people in the race for governor who are going to quit the job that they were either elected or appointed to do. And so I think Sarah Palin has pointed out why that might not be the best idea in the whole world. And frankly, I have a job to do, and I'm willing to do that job. I also am very excited about traveling around the state and having conversations with Minnesotans about how to move Minnesota forward.
Okay, Margaret Anderson-Kelliher, thank you for taking time out of your busy day, especially the day that you filed to run for governor, which you heard from her directly today on why she wanted to do it. Thanks again for helping us out here today.
Thank you so